Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new video series here. I am your host as always, Nathan P. Butler, and if you've watched anything else on this YouTube channel, you know that most of my videos, except for maybe two, are about Star Wars items in some form or another. Well, coming up very soon here at the end of August, we have the release of Disney Infinity 3.0, which is the first variation of the Disney Infinity video game that's going to include Star Wars characters, Star Wars missions, and whatnot. So for a lot of Star Wars fans, this will probably be the first time that they consider dipping themselves into Disney Infinity. What this playlist, this video series is going to be about is essentially a guide to Disney Infinity and some decision-making involving Disney Infinity, specifically geared for Star Wars fans. So if you're looking for just general Disney Infinity information, you'll see some, but this is geared towards Star Wars fans, particularly those who have probably not jumped into Disney Infinity before 3.0, so that some good decisions can be made about which version of 3.0 to pick up, whether it's something that they're interested in, and exactly how this works with all the different physical items and games available out there. This also, if you're following this channel, is yet another new camera being used here. I've replaced my old computer with the new one finally, but we'll see whether this camera works out that's built in, as well as the one that I bought near the end of the life cycle of my previous one. Biggest issue now is that the thing just wobbles really, really badly because it's a flip item, those two-in-ones, where you flip it over and it becomes a tablet, which means that anytime I bump into my table, you get some weird stuff like this happening. So I have to be a little bit more careful as I record not to move things around on the table here. But hopefully you're still going to be getting a crystal clear picture, at least relatively so, as opposed to my original camera. And we'll just see how it goes, whether to switch between this camera and the one that I was using for some of the later episodes, the 50-plus episodes from the Star Wars Home Video Library. So, that being said, in this episode, we want to look at just answering the question, what is Disney Infinity? Then we'll have another episode about the different physical items included with it and what they are meant to do. We'll take a look at some of the compatibility issues that might exist between different versions on different systems and different physical items. We'll also take a look at things like, hey, what is there that's going to be available at launch for Disney Infinity 3.0 for Star Wars fans? So to start with, I guess we should answer that Disney Infinity is a video game. So you're going to be playing this with perhaps a disc-based version of a game, or if you're playing on portable systems, it might be a little card like on the PlayStation Vita, or a little card like on the Nintendo 3DS. But for the most part, it's a physical video game that you buy. It is somewhat unlikely that you're going to be playing as a downloaded game because, especially if you're just starting out, you need to buy a physical starter set to get yourself all the physical pieces necessary to actually play the game. You see, Disney Infinity is one of these toy-based games, where you buy physical toys like with Amiibos or Skylanders, and you use those to play the video game. Without them, the video game is unplayable, for the most part. There are some digital-only versions where you don't actually have to buy the physical figures. We'll talk about that in another episode here. Now, in order to play Disney Infinity, you need an Infinity base that comes with the starter set. That is what looks like this. You got this little base, plugs in via USB plug here, has two circular pads on it and one hexagonal pad in most situations. On the two portable versions for 3DS and Vita, they released this smaller base that has one circular pad and one hexagon pad. The reason for this is because there is co-op play in most versions, and player 1 puts a character on the first pad, player 2 puts theirs on the second. Those portable versions don't have local co-op, so there's no need for a second circle pad. They can get away with just one circle pad and one hexagon pad. But these physical pads are what you're going to put your figures on. So let's say I want to play as Iron Man. I'm going to have an Iron Man figure. Right? You can always get your detailed information on the bottom, you know, Disney Infinity 2.0, Marvel, blah, blah, blah. You got my figure. I'm going to sit him onto pad number 1. And when I do that, there's going to be sort of a shimmering effect on the game, and up will pop Iron Man as a playable character in the game at that moment. The same goes for pad number 2. Maybe I want to play as Elsa from Frozen. Stick her on the pad. Boom! Pops up as player 2 during co-op play. Now this back part, It does a few different things. The main thing is you put playset pieces, as they're called, on that. We'll talk about them when we talk about the individual pieces of the game and whatnot. This one in particular is an Avengers Tower to access the Avengers playset. But that brings us to the important issue of game modes. Disney Infinity is primarily divided into two game modes. You have playsets and the toy box. I would say it's actually more like 2.5 game modes because there's some special things you can do in the toy box that are pre-existing games. A playset is a specific universe to play in or scenario to play in. In Disney Infinity 1.0, for instance, you had the universes or the playsets for The Lone Ranger, Monsters University, Pirates of the Caribbean, Toy Story, those types of settings, right? Now, those settings are going to bring with it different missions, side missions, scenarios, usually somewhat of a marginally open world that you can explore for collectibles and whatnot, but it's all designed around that particular franchise. Again, Toy Story, Pirates of the Caribbean, Cars, whatever. To access a playset, you will need a playset piece. Again, Avengers Tower accesses the Avengers one, or from 1.0, they had this interesting little piece that has 3 symbols on it that accesses the ones for Monsters University, Pirates of the Caribbean, and The Incredibles. But it's always one of these hexagon-based playset pieces that gives you access. Now, a playset, though, because it's built into that one franchise type of mode, it limits the amount of characters you can play as. So, for instance, to be able to play in Pirates of the Caribbean, you'll need someone like Captain Jack Sparrow, maybe Barbossa, or perhaps Davy Jones. But you need to have one of the characters from that franchise who are native, so to speak, to that set. Now, I say it's focused on a franchise. That was really the way that it was back in Disney Infinity 1.0. 2.0 then brought in the Marvel superheroes, and they started adding playsets that were Marvel, but there were multiple ones of them. So instead, it's not so much that a playset in that case is limiting you to one universe as one scenario within a universe. So for instance, for Disney Infinity 2.0, if I want to play in the Spider-Man playset, I could play with characters like Spider-Man, or Iron Fist, or Venom here, natively, because that's their associated playset. But if I want to play as Iron Man, sorry, Iron Man is not native to the Spider-Man playset. However, there are little coins you can find in the game. 10 in 2.0, it'll be just 1 in 3.0. Find all 10 coins for Iron Man, and you can play as Iron Man in that Spider-Man playset. He is what's called a crossover character. However, there are no coins to find, say, for Star-Lord. So if you want to play as Star-Lord in the Spider-Man playset, too bad. You are absolutely out of luck. So playsets have stories. Playsets actually have campaign modes to play through, fun stuff that's based around that universe and its concepts, but it's limiting in terms of what characters you can play as. For instance, in Disney Infinity 3.0, for Star Wars fans here, they've already announced there are going to be 3 playsets, 2 available early, 1 that won't come out until The Force Awakens. But there's the Twilight of the Republic playset. It's a prequel-era playset, where natively you can play as Anakin, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, Yoda, eventually Darth Maul. But say you want to play in there as a character from Rebels. Well, that's fine, but you got to find their crossover coin in order to do that. They aren't native to that set. In fact, the Rebels characters aren't native to any set, any play set. Or maybe you want to play the Rise Against the Empire play set. You can play that natively as Luke or Leia, apparently, or Vader, or eventually Han and Chewie when they come out. But if you want to play with that as Darth Maul, Anakin, Ahsoka, you got to find their crossover coins. They sort of opened this up a little bit in that all the Star Wars characters are being considered crossover characters for each playset, apparently. So you can unlock them kind of like Iron Man in the Spider-Man playset. There won't be any that you just can't access within one of them. But that is a new thing. They did have some Marvel characters locked out of some of the Marvel playsets completely. That will change with Star Wars. But initially, until you unlock crossover characters, you're limited to just that pool of initial native figures for that particular scenario. So playsets, I love them. I love the fact that you got these fun campaigns to play, but understand that they are limiting in terms of who you can play as. This idea that you can play as all the Disney characters at once is true for one mode, but not the other. The mode in which that is true is called the toy box. The toy box is more like a kid's got a big old toy box. They just open it up and start pulling out characters, and now I'm playing with Transformers and G.I. Joe at the same time and He-Man at the same time. Who cares? They're my toys. I can play with them however I want. That's the toy box. Toy box mode lets you play with any figures that you have, completely unlimited, no need to unlock them, and lets you even create your own world. As you collect characters, finish feats in the game, put playset pieces on the pad, you are unlocking toys for your toy box, which allow you to have many different little items you can use to create your own worlds, your own games. It's a pretty robust creation system. It reminds me a lot of Little Big Planet in that sense. You can create your own worlds. You can download games and worlds that other people have created in the Disney Infinity community, play all kinds of cool little scenarios, or play challenges and such that are pre-made within the toy box. Not really much of a story to it, but cool things that you can do in the toy box that are just an absolute free-for-all. And there are some characters that aren't native to any playset who only work in the toy box. Poor little Elsa from Frozen, she doesn't have a playset. She only works in toy box mode. There's another type of game with a pre-existing structure that you can also play. It's actually built into the toy box called toy box games that are unlocked with little coins like this. This is the Assault on Asgard toy box game. In this case, it's sort of a tower defense thing. There's another one called Escape from the Kiln that's more like a dungeon crawler type thing. For 3.0, one of the pre-order bonuses is Toy Box Challenge, which is this big, Toy Box Takeover, which is this big invasion type of battle in the toy box. So think of it as play sets are the stories for certain universes, but they're limited in who you can play with. Toy box is much less story-based, basically a free-for-all where you can create and use any character you want, and toy box games are an oddity that you can use in the toy box to play pre-existing games with a lot of the same kind of freedom that you get from the regular toy box. If that appeals to you, then maybe Disney Infinity is a game that you would be interested in playing. But understand that in order to play in most versions, you're going to have to be picking up those physical figures. If I want to play as Star-Lord, I have to buy Star-Lord. If I want to play as Venom, I have to buy Venom. On most platforms, again, leaving the digital-only ones aside for a moment, the only way you're going to get to play with the character is to buy the physical figure. There is no in-game way of buying a digital version of the character by itself. Again, we will talk about that when we talk about those other platforms and availability. So, I guess, bottom line here, Disney Infinity is a toy-based game. The toys themselves are figurines. They do not pose or anything. They are what you see is what you get. They do not change. You use those with a base to put those characters into the game to play in playset stories, toy box free-for-alls, or toy box games for pre-existing scenarios, though there aren't very many of them. It is a combination of collecting physical items and playing a video game. In our next episode, we'll take a look at the different versions that have existed of Disney Infinity, where those digital-only versions come in, and then we'll get into, in the follow-up video, a bit about the different pieces for playing the game. With that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the Disney Infinity players.